on live television in front of millions of viewers. Donald Trump boasting, "I have a 180 IQ, folks. 180. I'm a stable genius, the smartest person ever to run for president. Believe me." But that same night, Stephen Colbert looked straight into the camera with a calm, deadly smile, dropped a plain folder on his desk, and in one brutal moment completely shattered the myth. As the folder opened and the real numbers, grades, and old professor notes spilled out under the bright lights, Trump's loud empire of genius came crashing down live on television, exposing the painful truth Trump had spent decades trying to hide. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert had never felt quite like this before. 21. Tonight, however, the room felt heavier. The bright stage lights seemed hotter than normal. The house lights dimmed and the familiar theme music hit as Stephen Colbert walked out onto the stage of The Late Show. The audience erupted in loud applause, clapping and cheering like they always did on a big night. Colbert gave them a quick wave and that trademark calm smile. But tonight, his eyes looked a little sharper. He waited for the clapping to settle, then stepped behind his desk and looked straight into the camera. "Tonight, we're going to talk about something Donald Trump loves to talk about. How smart he is," he said. The crowd chuckled. Without another word, Colbert hit play on the big screen behind him. There it was, the exact clip from the recent rally. Trump standing tall on stage, red tie, big gestures, telling thousands of people, "I have a 180 Q, folks. 180. I'm a stable genius, believe me." The arena crowd in the clip went wild, cheering and chanting. Colbert let the full clip run, then froze it on Trump's confident smirk, and then he did something unusual. He said nothing. Colbert just stood there, letting the silence do its work. The weight of Trump's own words hung heavy in the air. Finally, Colbert leaned forward and spoke in that steady, almost too calm voice. "If you keep announcing how brilliant you are every single time a camera turns on, who exactly are you trying to convince?" The audience burst into laughter, but it wasn't the usual quick chuckle. This laugh had something sharper underneath it, like people were really thinking about the question. Heads nodded. A few people whispered to the person next to them. The mood in the studio had already shifted. It wasn't just another Trump joke night. Something real was starting. Then came the moment nobody in the audience saw coming. A large screen on the side of the stage suddenly lit up. There was Donald Trump himself, live via video call, sitting in what looked like one of his offices, smiling that big, confident smile. The crowd gasped. Someone had arranged the surprise link, and Trump had clearly jumped at the chance to jump in. Stephen, let me tell you." Trump started, his voice booming through the speakers, trying to take over right away. He laughed loudly. That signature Trump laugh, and kept talking fast. "This is going to be a great segment, folks. I'm the smartest president we've ever had. 180 IQ Wharton. Perfect memory." Colbert didn't raise his voice. He didn't look panicked. He simply pressed a button on his desk and Trump's audio cut out instantly. The picture stayed on screen. Trump still moving his mouth, still gesturing, but now completely silent. The contrast was jarring. The audience exploded with surprised laughter and cheers. Colbert looked at the muted Trump on the big screen and gave a small nod. "We'll get back to you in a minute, Donald, but first, let's talk about what you actually said." Trump kept talking on screen, clearly getting more agitated as he realized his voice wasn't coming through. His face started turning redder. The studio audience was loving it, clapping, pointing, some even standing up for a second. Then Stephen Colbert reached under his desk with no big flourish, no drum roll, no dramatic music. He simply pulled out a plain, ordinary manila folder and placed it on the desk in front of him. The audience leaned forward a little. It looked like something you'd see in any office. Nothing special, no giant prop, just paper. Colbert opened it slowly, turning the pages one by one, letting each quiet flip echo in the studio. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't performing, he was letting the moment breathe. And the silence made everything feel heavier. "Donald loves to talk about Wharton," Colbert said calmly, looking up from the first page. "He says he was top of his class, the best perfect scores. But here's what the actual records show." He held up a scanned transcript so the camera could catch it clearly. Not top of the class, not even close to the top 10%. His grades were above average. Solid B territory, a few B minuses, nothing that screamed genius. No honors listed, no special mentions, just normal college performance for a guy who came from a wealthy family and had every advantage. The audience didn't laugh right away. They were listening hard now. A few people whispered. Core kept going, his voice steady like he was reading the weather report, but every word landed like a quiet punch. He flipped to the next page. "These are the official summaries from Wharton. No evidence of him being the smartest guy in any room. He passed, he graduated. But the myth he built around it, that part doesn't match the paper trail at all." Then Colbert paused, picked up a specific sheet, and looked straight at the camera. "This one's from 1968. A professor who taught him wrote this note about Donald's work." He read it slowly, clearly. so every person in the studio and everyone watching at home could hear every single word. Donald has energy, but his analytical work is mediocre at best. He relies more on bold assertions than on careful reasoning or evidence. The entire studio went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming. No one coughed. No one shifted. The audience was holding its breath, eyes wide, waiting to see what would happen next. That one sentence from a professor 50-plus years ago hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't vicious. It was just honest, ordinary feedback, the kind every student gets at some point. But next to years of Trump calling himself a stable genius with a 180 IQ, it hit like a hammer. Colbert let the silence sit for another few seconds before he continued. This isn't about calling him stupid. This is about the giant gap between what he's been telling everyone for decades and what the actual record shows. He turned a normal college experience into a legend. And he's used that legend to call other people low IQ, to dismiss experts, to act like he's operating on a level no one else can reach. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some people started shaking their heads. Others nodded slowly like pieces were finally clicking into place. The folder wasn't a weapon. It was just paper. But in Colbert's calm hands, those ordinary pages were doing something powerful. They were making Trump's loudest story suddenly sound very small. Colbert closed the folder for a moment, resting his hand on it. "We're just getting started," he said quietly. The big screen still showed Trump's frozen image from earlier, mouth open mid-sentence. Looking a lot less unstoppable now. Then Stephen Colbert rested both hands on the plain folder and looked out at the audience. The energy in the studio had grown tense. Everyone could feel something big was coming. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. He simply sat there for a moment, letting the room settle. Then he spoke quietly. "Donald has spent years telling everyone his IQ is 180. He says it like it's a fact, like it proves everything. So tonight, let's look at a real number." He stopped talking completely. For 12 long seconds, an eternity on live television, the entire studio went silent. No music, no jokes, just dead air. The audience held their breath. Some people leaned forward in their seats. Others gripped the armrests. Colbert stared straight ahead, completely calm, forcing every person watching to sit with the weight of what was about to happen. The big screen still showed Trump's frozen image, but even that felt heavier now. Finally, Colbert looked down at the paper, then back up at the camera. According to verified testing records and standardized scores from that period, Donald Trump's IQ sits at 124, solid, respectable, above average, but nowhere near 180. The reaction was instant and powerful. The whole audience let out a loud collective ooh that rolled through the studio like a wave. Then the laughter started. First a few people, then the whole room. Uncontrollable, rolling, relieved laughter. It wasn't mean laughter. It was the sound of people finally seeing the gap they had suspected for years. Phones were already coming out. People were shaking their heads in disbelief. On the big side screen, Donald Trump's face turned deep red. His eyes widened and his mouth started moving fast. Even though his audio was still muted from earlier, you could clearly read his lips. "Fake rigged. This is a hoax." He was pointing angrily at the camera, face twisted with rage, banging his hand on the desk in front of him. The more he shouted silently on screen, the harder the audience laughed. The contrast was brutal. Trump melting down in perfect silence while the studio erupted around him. Colbert waited for the laughter to ease just a little, then continued in that same steady voice. "This is not about calling him stupid. Nobody here is saying that. This is about something much bigger. This is about spending decades weaponizing a lie, turning an ordinary number into a crown, using it to call everyone else low Q, using it to dismiss scientists, generals, judges, reporters, anyone who dared to disagree with him. He didn't just exaggerate. He built an entire identity on it. And he used that identity like a weapon against the rest of the country." The laughter slowly faded into something sharper. Murmurs, nods, and a few people even clapping. The mood had completely changed. What started as a late-night comedy segment now felt like a serious reckoning. Colbert flipped to another page in the folder and kept going. He told us he had the best memory, perfect test scores, the greatest instincts, but the actual record never backed it up, not even close. And every time someone asked for proof, he attacked them instead of showing the papers. Trump on the screen was still fuming, gesturing wildly, clearly demanding to be unmuted. His face had gone from red to almost purple with frustration. The audience kept reacting, some cheering, some laughing, many just staring in amazement at how fast the myth was cracking in real time. Colbert looked directly into the camera. "Numbers don't define a person, but when you spend years beating people over the head with a fake one, eventually someone's going to check the scale, and that's exactly what we just did." The studio exploded again, louder applause this time mixed with more laughter. Then Donald Trump's voice cut through the noise. The side screen showed him leaning forward, eyes wide with fury, no longer willing to stay quiet. "This is a total lie. he shouted, his face filling the monitor. That guy is a liar, a disloyal loser who probably never even went to Wharton. I was the best student there. Everybody said so. These people are desperate, folks. Desperate. Colbert sat back in his chair, calm as ever, and let Trump keep talking. The more Trump spiraled, the tighter the tension in the room grew. The audience was leaning forward, some laughing, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Trump kept going, voice getting louder and faster. I have the best memory. Perfect scores. I aced everything. This is fake news rigged by the failing Late Show. Colbert is a low IQ comedian who couldn't even get real guests anymore. Instead of fighting back with jokes, Colbert quietly flipped open the folder again. He held up another scanned document on the big screen. An old email chain from 1967 between professors. Donald, you said you have the best memory, Colbert said evenly. Then why did 3 different professors write notes saying you needed extra help with analytical assignments and often submitted work that was surface level at best? Trump froze for half a second, then exploded even harder. Those are fake, totally fake documents. I'll sue you. I'll sue the school. I'll sue whoever gave you those lies. His face was bright red now, sweat visible on his forehead. He was breathing heavy, pointing aggressively at the camera. Success is the only test that matters. I built a huge empire. I became president. That's the real proof, not these little papers you're waving around. The audience started reacting louder. Some people booed Trump's shouting. Others laughed at how frantic he sounded. Colbert didn't raise his voice once. You keep saying numbers don't matter, but then you obsess over them. You say success is the only test, yet you've spent decades lying about the test you actually took. Which one is it, Donald? Trump tried to talk over him, but his words were tumbling out faster, repeating the same attacks. Low IQ, rigged, witch hunt, fake. He was spiraling. The same phrases he always used, but this time they sounded more desperate than powerful. The audience could see it. The man who always controlled the narrative was losing control right in front of them. Colbert let the silence return for a moment after Trump's latest outburst. Then he said quietly, "This is what happens when the myth gets challenged. You don't defend the record. You attack the people asking questions. That's not strength, that's panic." Trump slammed his hand down on the desk in his office. "I'll sue every one of you. This show is finished." "You're all finished." His voice cracked slightly as he yelled, "I'll sue you all." Over and over. The studio audience lost it. They rose to their feet, cheering, laughing, clapping wildly. The roar was massive. People were pointing at the screen, some shouting back, "Go ahead and sue." The energy was raw and electric. The cheers in the Ed Sullivan Theater had barely died down when Donald Trump completely lost control on the big screen. His face filled the monitor red and furious as he switched into full attack mode. "Stephen Colbert is a very low IQ guy," he shouted, jabbing his finger toward the camera. "A failing comedian. His ratings are terrible. Nobody watches this garbage show anymore. He's just a fake news puppet for the radical left, folks. A total puppet. This is all rigged. A witch hunt by sad, low-energy people who are so jealous of my success they can't stand it." Trump didn't take a breath. He kept firing nonstop. "I'm the smartest person to ever run for president. Everybody knows it. This comedian thinks waving around fake papers makes him look smart. Pathetic. Very, very sad. Colbert has no talent, no ratings, and no brains. He's desperate because his career is dying." The audience reacted instantly, some booing loudly, others laughing at how unhinged he sounded. A few people in the back even started chanting "Colbert, Colbertum" just to push back against Trump's shouting. Colbert never raised his voice once. He stayed sitting calmly behind his desk, completely composed, and slowly flipped to the next page in the plain manila folder. "Since we're talking about fake things, Donald," he said in that steady, almost gentle tone, "let's look at this." He held up a scanned document on the giant monitor so everyone could see it clearly. It was an old email exchange from Trump's time at Wharton along with a signed agreement and payment receipt. "This proves you paid another student to write several of your major essays and papers. Here's the signature. Here's the email confirmation, and here's the receipt showing how much you paid multiple times." The audience let out a loud collective gasp. People leaned forward in their seats, murmuring and whispering to each other. The documents were crystal clear on the big screen. Colbert continued without any drama in his voice. "This wasn't a one-time thing. The records show it happened repeatedly. So when you spent decades bragging about your brilliant mind and perfect academic record, these details matter." Trump looked stunned for a brief second, his mouth opening and closing, but he quickly recovered and exploded again. "That's completely fake, totally fabricated. I never paid anyone. I did all my own work. These are lies from dishonest people." His voice was getting louder and more frantic. He was breathing heavily now, sweat visible on his forehead under the studio lights. Colbert looked straight at the screen and asked the direct question. "You always say you have the best memory in the world, Donald. The greatest memory of all time. Then why did 3 different professors write notes in 1967 saying you needed extra help with basic assignments?" They said your work was often rushed, lacked depth, and needed significant rewriting. Why is that on record if your memory was so perfect? Trump stammered. For the first time, he looked visibly rattled on live television. Well, that was a long time ago. Those professors, they don't remember. He shook his head hard, trying to regain control, then switched tactics completely. Success is the only test that matters, he yelled. I built a massive empire. I became president of the United States. I beat all of them. These little papers from 50 years ago mean nothing. Only losers care about old grades. Real winners focus on results. Big results. Tremendous results. The more Trump talked, the more he repeated the same lines over and over. Success. Winners. I'm a winner. His voice cracked with frustration. He attacked Colbert again. Attacked the witness, attacked the documents, attacked the entire show, anything except directly answering the evidence in front of him. The panic spiral was obvious to everyone watching. Every new fact Colbert presented made Trump shout louder, but the louder he got, the weaker and more desperate his words sounded. The audience was completely hooked. Some people laughed openly at Trump's frantic responses. Others clapped for Colbert's calm, methodical approach. The energy inside the theater had shifted entirely. The man who always dominated every conversation was now fighting desperately to keep his carefully built myth from falling apart right in front of millions of viewers. Colbert let the silence return for a few seconds after Trump's latest outburst. Then he said softly but clearly, "This is exactly what happens when the story you've told the country for decades finally meets the actual record. You don't defend it. You just attack everyone around it." Trump was still shouting on the big screen, face red, arms waving, but his attacks were starting to sound more like noise than power. Then Stephen Colbert leaned forward slightly, looked straight into the camera, and spoke with a calm but powerful voice that cut through the tension in the room. "There is nothing shameful about not being a legend in every room you walk into," he began. "There is nothing wrong with being an ordinary student who went to college, worked through his classes, got decent grades, and then built a life the best way he could. Millions of Americans do exactly that every single year. It's normal. It's human. But the shame begins when you take that ordinary story and twist it into a giant throne made of pure fiction. When you spend decades sitting high up on that fake throne and using it to look down on everyone else, calling them low IQ, stupid losers, dummies, and failures. That's when the lie stops being harmless and starts becoming toxic. That's when it hurts the country." Colbert paused for a second, letting his words sink in. "You didn't just brag about being smart, Donald. You weaponized the brag. You used it as a club to dismiss scientists, intelligence experts, military generals, judges, reporters, and even your own voters when they dared to question you. You turned a normal college recording into an unbreakable shield so nobody could ever hold you accountable. Tonight, we're not destroying you. We're simply holding up the real record next to the myth you built. And the difference is impossible to ignore anymore." The entire theater was dead quiet for a moment. Then the audience rose to their feet as one. The applause started strong and quickly turned into a thunderous, sustained standing ovation that lasted a full 45 seconds. People clapped with real force, some cheering loudly, others whistling, a few even wiping tears from their eyes. The sound filled every corner of the Ed Sullivan Theater like a wave. It wasn't polite applause. It was deep, emotional, and cathartic. Years of frustration with the constant bragging and put-downs finally finding a release. On the big screen, something remarkable happened. Donald Trump went completely silent for 6 straight seconds, the first time in his very long public career that millions had ever seen him truly quiet. He just sat there staring. The camera zoomed in tight on his face. No shouting, no wild hand gestures, no quick comeback, just silence. His mouth moved slightly, but no words came out. The close-up captured everything in raw detail. The red face, the heavy breathing, the wide eyes, and the momentary shock as the weight of the moment finally hit him. For those few seconds, the loudest man in American politics had nothing to say. When the long ovation finally began to settle and people slowly sat back down, still buzzing with emotion, Colbert delivered the final devastating line in that same calm, measured voice. "You don't actually use intelligence the way serious people use it," he said. "You don't use it for clear judgment, for learning from mistakes, for careful thinking, or for carrying real responsibility. Instead, you use the idea of intelligence like cheap costume jewelry. You flash it under the bright lights. You wave it around. You hope it sparkles enough that nobody bothers to look too closely or ask if it's real. But when someone finally picks it up, weighs it in their hand, and tests it, the illusion falls apart completely." The audience erupted once again, this time with even louder cheers, and another round of sustained applause. Many stayed standing, nodding hard, pointing at the screen. The line had struck something deep. Trump's face on the monitor tightened visibly. He looked smaller in that moment. the usual bluster replaced by clear discomfort and exhaustion. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words came slower, weaker, less sure than before. Colbert sat back slightly in his chair, the plain folder still open on the desk like a quiet witness to everything that had unfolded. The late show credits had barely finished rolling when Donald Trump stormed onto his phone. Still red-faced from the live segment, he immediately began firing off tweets. Rigged show, fake documents, low IQ Colbert. This is the biggest witch hunt in history. My IQ is 180 and everybody knows it. Total hoax. He posted again and again, trying desperately to regain control of the narrative. But it was already too late. The clips from the episode were spreading across the internet at record speed. Within the first hour, the moment Colbert revealed the real IQ number had been viewed over 15 million times. The witness confrontation was everywhere. By morning, the entire segment had been clipped, memed, and shared more than any late-night moment in years. Trump's furious tweets only made it worse. Every angry post became fresh fuel for the fire. A week later, the story reached its final explosive chapter. On the next episode of The Late Show, Stephen Colbert welcomed a new guest, a retired Wharton professor who had taught Trump in 1967. This time there was no blur, no voice change. The professor, now in his 80s, walked onto the stage carrying a thick folder of his own. "I kept everything," he told the audience. "I never throw away student work." He then held up scanned copies of Trump's actual exam papers and essays from that year. The documents appeared on the big screen in high resolution. Red ink comments covered the pages. "Lacks depth, needs major improvement. More analysis required." The audience reacted with loud gasps and sustained applause. That same evening, Donald Trump was forced to respond. He went live on his own social platform, something he rarely did under pressure like this. For the first time in his very public life, his voice shook. "These professors, they're being paid off," he said. But the usual fire was missing. His hands trembled slightly on camera. "This is all fake. I was the best." His words trailed off for a second. He tried to recover with the old slogans, but they sounded hollow now. Millions watched the live stream, and many noticed the same thing. The roar wasn't the same anymore. It had cracks in it. Back in the studio on the night of the original episode, long after the audience had gone home, Stephen Colbert sat alone at his desk. The stage lights were dimmed. The big screens were dark. Only a single spotlight remained on, shining down on the plain manila folder that had started it all. He picked it up, flipped through the pages one last time, and then gently closed it. "Myths die," he said quietly to the empty theater. "When someone finally makes them sit still long enough to be measured." He stood up, turned off the last light, and walked off stage. The theater went completely dark. For a few seconds, the only sound that remained was the faint echo of the audience's laughter from earlier that night, still ringing through the empty seats like a reminder that something real had shifted. The loudest myth in modern politics had been forced to sit still under bright lights, and once measured, it would never sound quite the same.